Tonight is the third night. We are talking on the Digha Nikaya Suttas. Now we come to Sutta number 3, Ambattha Sutta. It's about Ambattha. Thus have I heard. Once the Lord was touring Kosala with a large number of monks, some 500, and he came to a Kosalan Brahmin village called Ichanangala. And he stayed in the dense jungle of Ichanangala. At that time, the Brahmin Pokarasati was living at Ukata, a populous place full of grass, timber, water and corn, which had been given to him by King Pasenadi of Kosala as a royal gift and with royal powers. And Pokarasati heard say, the ascetic Gotama, son of the Sakyans, who has gone forth from the Sakyan clan, etc., is staying in the dense jungle of Ichanangala. And concerning that blessed Lord, a good report has been spread about. This blessed Lord is an Arahant, a Sammasambuddha, perfected in knowledge and conduct, a well-farer, knower of the worlds, unequalled trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, a Buddha, a blessed Lord. He proclaims this world with its gods, Maras, Brahmas, the world of ascetics and Brahmins with its princes and people, having come to know it by his own knowledge. He teaches a Dhamma that is lovely in its beginning, lovely in its middle, and lovely in its ending, in the spirit and in the letter, and he displays the fully perfected, thoroughly purified holy life. And indeed, it is good to see such Arahants. Now at that time, Pokarasati had a pupil, the youth Ambattha, who was a student of the Vedas, who knew the mantras, perfected in the 3 Vedas, a skilled expounder of the rules and rituals, the law of sounds and meanings, and fifthly, oral tradition, complete in philosophy and in the marks of a great man, admitted and accepted by his master. In the 3 Vedas with the words, what I know, you know. What you know, I know. And Pokarasati said to Ambattha, Ambattha, my son, the ascetic Gotama, is staying in the dense jungle of Ichanangala, and concerning that blessed Lord, a good report has been spread about, etc. Now you go to see the ascetic Gotama and find out whether this report is correct or not, and whether the Reverend Gotama is as they say or not. In that way we shall put the Reverend Gotama to the test. Sir, how shall I find out whether the report is true, or whether the Reverend Gotama is as they say or not? According to the tradition of our mantras, Ambattha, the great man who is possessed of the 32 marks of a great man has only 2 courses open to him. If he lives the household life, he will become a ruler, a wheel-turning righteous monarch of the law, conqueror of the 4 quarters, who has established the security of his realm and is possessed of the 7 treasures. These are the wheel treasure, the elephant treasure, the horse treasure, the jewel treasure, the woman treasure, the householder treasure, and as 7th, the counselor treasurer. He has more than 1,000 sons, who are heroes of heroic stature, conquerors of the hostile army. He dwells, having conquered this sea-girt land, without stick or sword, by the law. But if he goes forth from the household life into homelessness, then he will become an Arahant, Sammasambuddha, one who draws back the veil from the world. And Ambattha, I am the passer on of the mantras, and you are the receiver. Stop here for a moment. So this Pokarasati is one of those well-known Brahmins, well-versed in the Brahmin tradition, and his disciple is also very learned. All those things that a Brahmin is supposed to learn, he has learned. That's why the teacher tells him, what I know, you know. What you know, I know. And lastly, the last part, this Pokarasati told Ambattha, I am the passer on of the mantras and you are the receiver. In other words, I am the teacher and you are the pupil. So you go and find out whether this Samana Gotama or ascetic Gotama is as enlightened as they say, and you judge him by the 32 marks of a great man. This 32 marks of a great man is a Brahmin tradition. Very good, sir, said Ambattha at Pokarasati's words, and he got up, passed by Pokrasati by his right side, got into his chariot drawn by a mare, and accompanied by a number of young men, headed for the dense jungle of Ichanangala. He drove as far as the carriage would go, then alighted and continued on foot. At that time, a number of monks were walking up and down in the open air. Ambattha approached them and said, "Where is the Reverend Gotama to be found just now? We have come to see the Reverend Gotama." The monks thought, "This is Ambattha, a youth of good family and a pupil of the distinguished Brahmin Pokrasati. The Lord would not mind having a conversation with such a young man." And they said to Ambattha, "That is his dwelling with the door closed. Go quietly up to it. Go on to the veranda without haste, cough, and knock on the board. The Lord will open the door to you." Ambattha went up to the dwelling and on to the veranda, coughed and knocked. The Lord opened the door, and Ambattha went in. The young man entered, exchanged courtesies with the Lord, and sat down to one side. But Ambattha walked up and down while the Lord sat there, uttered some vague words of politeness, and then stood so speaking before the seated Lord. And the Lord said to Ambattha, "Well now, Ambattha, would you behave like this if you were talking to venerable and learned Brahmins, teachers of teachers, as you do with me, walking and standing while I am sitting, and uttering vague words of politeness?" And he said, "No, Reverend Gotama, a Brahmin should walk with a walking Brahmin, stand with a standing Brahmin, sit with a sitting Brahmin, and lie down with a Brahmin who is lying down. But as far as these shaven little ascetics, menials, black scourings from Brahma's foot, with them it is fitting to speak just as I do with the Reverend Gotama." Stop here for a moment. So you see this young Brahmin is very arrogant, doesn't show any respect for the Buddha, even though he has come to the Buddha's kuti. And he says that the Buddha is one of those shaven little ascetics, menials, black scourings from Brahma's foot. These Brahmins, they believe that they are born from the Brahma's head, whereas other sects, the Khattiya warrior clan, the merchant clan, the worker clan, all born from the foot of Brahma. Brahma is their god. Mahabrahma is the equivalent of God, creator of the world. And so, because they look down on other castes, they call them black scourings from Brahma's foot. In other words, other sects are black. They think they are fair. And the Buddha said, "But Ambattha, you came here seeking something. Whatever it was you came for, you should listen attentively to hear about it. Ambattha, you have not perfected your training. Your conceit of being trained is due to nothing but inexperience." But Ambattha was angry and displeased at being called untrained, and he turned on the Lord with curses and insults. Thinking, "The ascetic Gotama bears me ill will," he said, "Reverend Gotama, the Sakyans are fierce, rough-spoken, touchy and violent. Being of menial origin, being menials, they do not honor, respect, esteem, revere or pay homage to Brahmins. With regard to this, it is not proper that they do not pay homage to Brahmins." This was the first time Ambattha accused the Sakyans of being menials. And the Buddha said, "But Ambattha, what have the Sakyans done to you?" And he said, "Reverend Gotama, once I went to Kapilavatthu on some business for my teacher, the Brahmin Pokrasati, and I came to the Sakyans meeting hall. And at that time, a lot of Sakyans were sitting on high seats in their meeting hall, poking each other with their fingers, laughing and playing about together. And it seemed to me that they were just making fun of me, and no one offered me a seat. With regard to this, it is not proper that they do not pay homage to the Brahmins." This was the second time Ambattha accused the Sakyans of being menials. And the Buddha said, "But Ambattha, even the quail, that little bird, can talk as she likes on her own nest. Kapilavatthu is the Sakyans' home, Ambattha. They do not deserve censure for such a trifle." And Ambattha said, "Reverend Gotama, there are 4 castes, the Khattiyas or warrior clan, the Brahmins, the merchants and the artisans. And of these 4 castes, 3, the Khattiyas, Merchants and artisans are entirely subservient to the Brahmins. With regard to this, it is not proper that they should not pay homage to the Brahmins. This was the third time Ambattha accused the Sakyans of being menials. Stop here for a moment. So this is only the Brahmin belief. They think they are the most superior caste and everybody else should pay homage to them. But other people don't think so. Then the Lord thought, this young man goes too far in abusing the Sakyans. Suppose I were to ask after his clan name. So he said, Ambattha, what is your clan? And Ambattha answered, I am a Kanhayan, Reverend Gotama. And the Buddha said, Ambattha, in former days, according to those who remember the ancestral lineage, the Sakyans were the masters, and you are descended from a slave girl of the Sakyans. For the Sakyans regard King Okaka as their ancestor. At one time, King Okaka, to whom his queen was dear and beloved, wishing to transfer the kingdom to her son, banished his elder brothers from the kingdom, Okamukha, Karandu, Hattiniya, and Sinipura. And these, being banished, made their home on the flank of the Himalayas beside a lotus pond where there was a big grove of teak trees. And for fear of contaminating the stock, they cohabited with their own sisters. Then King Okaka asked his ministers and counselors, where are the princes living now? And they told him. At this, King Okaka exclaimed, they are strong as teak, Sakka. These princes, they are real Sakyans. And that is how the Sakyans got their well-known name. And the king was the ancestor of the Sakyans. Now King Okaka had a slave girl named Disa, who gave birth to a black child. The black thing, when it was born, exclaimed, wash me, mother, bathe me, mother, deliver me from this dirt, and I will bring you profit. Because Ambattha, just as people today use the term hobgoblin, pisacha, as a term of abuse, so in those days they said black, kanha, and they said, as soon as he was born, he spoke. He is born a kanha, a hobgoblin. That is how in former days the Sakyans were the masters, and you are descended from a slave girl of the Sakyans. On hearing this, the young man said, Reverend Gotama, do not humiliate Ambattha too much with talk of his being descended from a slave girl. Ambattha is well born, of a good family. He is very learned. He is well spoken, a scholar, well able to hold his own in this discussion with the Reverend Gotama. Then the Lord said to the young man, if you consider that Ambattha is ill-born, not of a good family, unlearned, ill-spoken, no scholar, unable to hold his own in this discussion with the ascetic Gotama, then let Ambattha be silent, and you conduct this discussion with me. But if you think he is able to hold his own, then you be quiet and let him discuss with me. And they said, Ambattha is well born, Reverend Gotama. We will be silent. He shall continue. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, actually, Ambattha, you are descended from a slave girl, and your ancestor was a black child. These friends of Ambattha, they didn't believe it, so they said, they told the Buddha not to humiliate Ambattha. And then the Buddha told them, if you think Ambattha is not able to argue with me, then you argue with me. But if you think he is able, then let him argue with me and you keep quiet. I think in the Indian tradition, they argue one by one, one to one. Then the Lord said to Ambattha, Ambattha, I have a fundamental question for you, which you will not like to answer. If you don't answer or evade the issue, if you keep silent or go away, your head will split into 7 pieces. What do you think, Ambattha? Have you heard from old and venerable Brahmins, teachers of teachers, where the Kanhayans came from, or who was their ancestor? At this, Ambattha remained silent. The Lord asked him a second time. Again, Ambattha remained silent. And the Lord said, answer me now, Ambattha. This is not a time for silence. Whoever, Ambattha, does not answer a fundamental question put to him by a Tathagata, by the third asking, has his head split into 7 pieces. And at that moment, Vajirapani, the Yakka, holding a huge iron club, flaming, ablaze and glowing, up in the sky just above Ambattha, was thinking, if this young man, Ambattha, does not answer a proper question put to him by the Blessed Lord by the third time of asking, I'll split his head into 7 pieces. The Lord saw Vajirapani, and so did Ambattha. And at the sight, Ambattha was terrified and unnerved. His hair stood on end, and he sought protection, shelter, and safety from the Lord. Crouching down close to the Lord, he said, what did the Reverend Gotama say? May the Reverend Gotama repeat what he said. And the Buddha said, what do you think, Ambattha? Have you heard who was the ancestor of the Kanhayans? And he answered, yes, I have heard it just as the Reverend Gotama said. That is where the Kanhayans came from. He was their ancestor. Hearing this, the young man made a loud noise and clamor. So Ambattha is ill-born, not of a good family, born of a slave girl of the Sakyans, and the Sakyans are Ambattha's masters. We disparaged the ascetic Gotama, thinking he was not speaking the truth. I'll stop here for a moment. So here you see, the Buddha is protected by the Devas, and also the Devas is always on hand to help the Buddha. Probably this Yakka, he saw that this person needs to be taught a lesson, so he came with this big club, waiting to pound him into 7 pieces. Then the Lord thought, it is too much the way these young men humiliate Ambattha for being the son of a slave girl. I must get him out of this. So he said to the young men, don't disparage Ambattha too much for being the son of a slave girl. That Kanha was a mighty sage. He went to the south country, learned the mantras of the Brahmins there, and then went to King Okaka and asked for his daughter Madharupi. And King Okaka, furiously angry, exclaimed, so this fellow, the son of a slave girl, wants my daughter, and put an arrow to his bow. But he was unable either to shoot the arrow or withdraw it. Then the ministers and councillors came to the sage Kanha and said, spare the king, reverend sir, spare the king. And he said, the king will be safe, but if he loses the arrow downwards, the earth will quake as far as his kingdom extends. And they said, reverend sir, spare the king, spare the land. And Kanha said, the king and the land will be safe, but if he loses the arrow upwards, then as far as his realm extends, the gods will not let it rain for 7 years. And they said, reverend sir, spare the king and the land, and may the God let it rain. And he said, the king and the land will be safe, and the God will let it rain. But if the king points the arrow at the crown prince, the prince will be completely safe. Then the ministers exclaimed, let King Okaka point the arrow at the crown prince, the prince will be perfectly safe. The king did so, and the prince was unharmed. Then King Okaka, terrified and fearful of divine punishment, gave away his daughter Madharupi. So young men, do not disparage Ambattha too much for being the son of a slave girl. That Kanha was a mighty sage. Stop here for a moment. So this Kanha, he went to learn the mantras, and the mantras are actually very powerful things. Mantras are secrets handed down to the Brahmins, probably by the Devas. And it is their secret. They don't want other castes to know. But later, because of greed, they sold away the secrets, so that a lot of the mantras are now public knowledge. And the Buddha said that these mantras, you can do many things with them. That normally a person with psychic power only can do, but the mantras you can do. For example, if you know a certain mantra, you can walk through the wall. Maybe that's how David Copperfield walks through the wall. So this king got so angry that this black fellow wants his daughter. That's how he was thinking. So he took his bow and arrow. He wanted to shoot this Kanha to death. But this Kanha made him not able to shoot the arrow or to bring it down. And then, so finally, to make the king know how powerful he is, he said the king must point the arrow at his son, whom he loves dearly, the crown prince. And so the king had no choice but to do that. But the prince was not harmed. And so the king got frightened, so gave away the daughter to him. So the Buddha said, don't look down on Kanha so much. He's the ancestor, this ancestor of the Ambattha, for he was a mighty sage. Then the Lord said, Ambattha, what do you think? Suppose a Khattiya youth were to wed a Brahmin maiden, and there was a son of the union. Would that son of a Khattiya youth and a Brahmin maiden receive a seed and water from the Brahmins? He would, Reverend Gautama. Would they allow him to eat at funeral rites, at rice offerings, at sacrifices, or as a guest? They would, Reverend Gautama. Would they teach him mantras or not? They would, Reverend Gautama. Would they keep their women covered or uncovered? Uncovered, Reverend Gautama. But would the Khattiya sprinkle him with the Khattiya consecration? No, Reverend Gautama. Why not? Because, Reverend Gautama, he is not well born on his mother's side. What do you think, Ambattha? Suppose a Brahmin youth were to wed a Khattiya maiden, and there was a son of the union. Would that son of a Khattiya youth and a Brahmin maiden receive a seed and water from the Brahmins? He would, Reverend Gautama, etc., etc. But would the Khattiya spring him with the Khattiya consecration? No, Reverend Gautama. Why not? Because, Reverend Gautama, he is not well born on his father's side. So, Ambattha, the Khattiyas, through a man taking a woman or a woman taking a man, are senior to the Brahmins. What do you think, Ambattha? Take the case of a Brahmin who just stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is making this Ambattha see that if a Brahmin and a Khattiya, a warrior caste, were to wed, then the offspring, the son, would be recognized totally by the Brahmins, but would not be recognized, accepted by the Khattiyas, meaning that the Khattiyas are one notch higher. They only recognize a pure Khattiya, but if he has Brahmin blood, they will not recognize him as a pure Khattiya. Whereas the Brahmins, since they recognize the offspring of a Brahmin and a Khattiya, that means they accept that the Khattiyas are equal to them. So here the Buddha makes him see that actually the Khattiyas are on a higher. So just now I was saying that the Buddha shows Ambattha that if a Brahmin and a Khattiya were to wed, their offspring is recognized by the Brahmins, but not recognized as equal by the Khattiyas, meaning that the Khattiyas consider themselves one notch higher than the Brahmins, although the Brahmins claim that they are higher. But the fact that they accept the offspring of a Khattiya and the Brahmin as totally as a Brahmin on equal footing as a Brahmin, that means they look up to the Khattiyas, the warrior caste, because the Khattiyas, only the Khattiya, the warrior caste, can become a king. Okay, to continue. What do you think, Ambattha? Take the case of a Brahmin who for some reason has had his head shaved by the Brahmins, has been punished with a bag of ashes and banished from the country or the city. Would he receive a seed and water from the Brahmins? No, Reverend Gautama. Would they allow him to eat as a guest? No, Reverend Gautama. Would they teach him mantras or not? They would not, Reverend Gautama. Would they keep their women covered or uncovered? Covered, Reverend Gautama. What do you think, Ambattha? Take the case of a Khattiya who had his head, who for some reason has had his head shaved by the Khattiyas and banished from the country or the city. Would he receive a seed and water from the Brahmins? He would, Reverend Gautama. Would they allow him to eat as a guest? They would, Reverend Gautama. Would they teach him mantras? They would. Would they keep their women covered or uncovered? they would keep the uncovered, Reverend Gautama. But then Katya has so far reached the extreme of humiliation that he has been banished from the country or the city. So even if a Katya has suffered extreme humiliation, he is superior and the Brahmins are inferior. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is using another example, saying that if a Brahmin were to do some offense, commit some offense, and he is punished by it, so the Brahmins after that would not receive him as a Brahmin. But if a Katya, a warrior caste person, were to commit the same offense and banished by the Katyas, still the Brahmins would receive him, meaning that the Brahmins still accept that the Katyas are actually superior to them. The Buddha said, Ambattha, this verse was pronounced by Brahma's Sanan Kumara, the Katyas best among those who value clan. He with knowledge and conduct is best of gods and men. This verse was rightly sung, not wrongly, rightly spoken, not wrongly, connected with profit, not unconnected. And Ambattha, I too say this, the Katyas best among those who value clan. He with knowledge and conduct is best of gods and men.